No one cares about the likes of you. Now, keep your mouth shut, or you'll regret ever drawing breath." The venomous words spewed from a tormentor's lips as he and his cronies bound Alicia Carter to an ancient oak, abandoning her to the encroaching twilight. They viewed it as a cruel jest, a harmless prank, convinced no one would ever hold them to account. However, Alicia was no ordinary girl. She was the daughter of David Carter, a distinguished Delta Force commander, a man whose very essence was forged in precision strikes, the unwavering shield of the innocent, and the righteous arbiter of retribution against those who dared to transgress. To her assailants, he was merely a concerned parent. In reality, he was the absolute last person they should have ever antagonized, especially after the local sheriff dismissed the incident as mere adolescent mischief. How far would a father's devotion extend when the legal system faltered in its duty to protect his child? Before we delve deeper, please share your location in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe, as tomorrow's narrative promises to be an unforgettable experience. The morning sun cast elongated shadows across the Carter family's driveway as Angela meticulously helped Alicia adjust her backpack. "You've got this, sweetie," Angela assured, squeezing Alicia's hand as they settled into their silver sedan. "Just be your authentic self." Alicia nodded, her gaze fixed on their new residence receding in the side mirror. The relocation from Atlanta had been abrupt, a consequence of her father's recent reassignment. The unassuming town of Riverside, with its placid streets and time-worn wooden houses, felt like a journey back in time. "I know, Mom," Alicia responded, striving for a confidence she didn't quite feel. "It's just another first day, right?" Angela, her eyes conveying a knowing understanding, glanced at her daughter as she steered onto Main Street. "That's my girl. Remember what your father always advises. Stand tall. Think clearly." Alicia echoed the familiar words, a faint smile gracing her lips. The comforting cadence helped to steady her burgeoning nerves. The school's parking lot was already abuzz with activity upon their arrival. Clusters of students congregated near the main entrance, their joyous laughter drifting on the morning air. Alicia observed the palpable segregation, noticing how students gravitated towards their own kind. White students occupied one side, while the handful of black students congregated on another. A pang of disappointment tightened her chest, but she lifted her chin resolutely. "I'll be here to pick you up at 3 o'clock, Angela said, her fingers brushing Alicia's arm. "Text me if you require anything." Inside, the school's corridors thrummed with the infectious energy of a new academic year. Alicia located her locker, carefully arranging her notebooks within, her breaths deep and measured as she attempted to calm herself. The bell's resonant chimes signaled the start of the day, and she made her way to her first period English class. Mrs. Peterson's classroom was already half occupied when Alicia entered. She selected a seat towards the middle, preferring not to retreat to the back, yet lacking the courage for the front row. The teacher, a slender woman with kind eyes, offered her a warm smile. "Class, we have a new student joining us today," Mrs. Peterson announced. "Would you care to introduce yourself?" Alicia stood, her legs feeling unsteadily fragile. I'm Alicia Carter. My family recently relocated from Atlanta." It was then that she heard it, a snicker emanating from the rear of the room. Her eyes instinctively found the source, for young men lounging in their seats as if they owned the establishment. Their ringleader, sporting impeccably styled blonde hair and expensive attire, whispered something that elicited louder laughter from his companions. "Thank you, Alicia," Mrs. Peterson said, her gaze shifting. "Brandon Hayes, do you have something to contribute to our discussion?" Brandon's piercing blue eyes fixed on Alicia with a disarming cruelty. "No, he drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. "Just extending a welcome to our new classmate." The boy beside him, Kyle, barely suppressed another burst of amusement. Lanky and sporting spiky brown hair, his face bore a perpetual, sardonic grin. On Brandon's other side sat Trevor, who observed everything with a calculated intensity, and Mason, whose broad shoulders seemed to strain against the confines of his desk. Alicia resumed her seat, her cheeks aflame. Their hushed whispers persisted, words she had fervently hoped never to hear again, words that sent a chilling revulsion through her. She opened her notebook, directing her attention to the pristine white pages, seeking refuge from the palpable animosity behind her. The morning crawled by. In every class, Alicia sensed their scrutinizing gazes upon her. They seemed to materialize perpetually. Brandon's retinue, occupying space with an air of arrogant swagger and spite. During chemistry, Kyle deliberately knocked her books from the lab table. In history, Trevor ensured she overheard his pronouncements about maintaining racial purity. Mason simply cracked his knuckles whenever she passed. At lunchtime, Alicia sought a secluded corner of the cafeteria. She picked at a sandwich, observing the other students engaged in animated conversation and laughter. A few black students offered brief nods in her direction, but their eyes conveyed a warning rather than an invitation. The unspoken message was clear: stay within your designated sphere. Keep your head lowered. The afternoon classes blurred into a monotonous progression. Alicia meticulously took notes, responded to inquiries when called upon, and endeavored to disregard the occasional paper projectiles striking her back. She contemplated texting her mother, but ultimately decided against it. She refused to grant them the satisfaction of witnessing her unravel. As the final bell rang, Alicia swiftly gathered her belongings. She was mere steps from the main entrance when it happened. Brandon abruptly blocked her path, his shoulder colliding forcefully with hers. The impact sent her staggering sideways. "Welcome to the genuine South, city girl," he sneered, a smile revealing an unnerving row of perfect white teeth. Alicia's hands instinctively clenched into fists within her pockets. A fierce urge to scream, to retaliate, to diminish him as he sought to diminish her, surged within her. Instead, she forced herself to continue walking, her gait measured and steady despite the tremor in her legs. The sunlight outside felt excessively bright, jarringly cheerful against the oppressive darkness churning within her. Other students streamed past, some feigning ignorance, others observing with covert curiosity. Alicia pressed onward, counting her breaths, a technique her father had instilled in her during childhood storms. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps away from Brandon and his malevolent grin. She was determined not to betray how profoundly he had shaken her. She would not surrender that power to him. Yet, as she walked toward the parking lot where her mother awaited, Alicia understood this was merely the prelude. The real South, Brandon had declared, and she could feel the insidious threat embedded within those words. A promise of greater tribulations to come. Alicia's shoes squeaked against the newly polished cafeteria floor as she maneuvered her lunch tray. The room buzzed with animated chatter and laughter, yet she felt an peculiar detachment, as if observing the scene through a pane of glass. Her sandwich and apple slid precariously on the plastic tray as she navigated the crowded tables. It was then that she heard it, Brandon's voice, deliberately amplified to carry. "Hey guys, do you think she knows anything about cotton picking?" Brandon's words sliced through the ambient noise. Kyle and Mason erupted into exaggerated guffaws, while Trevor smirked, anticipating her reaction. Alicia's hands tightened on her tray, her knuckles turning a stark white. She continued walking, one foot deliberately placed in front of the other, pretending not to hear the cruel jests emanating from the table. "Probably in her blood, right?" Kyle chimed in, eliciting more snickers. Mason's booming laugh reverberated off the walls. "Maybe she can give us some family history lessons." The cafeteria seemed to stretch into an interminable expanse. Other students glanced their way, then quickly averted their eyes, suddenly engrossed in their meals or mobile devices. Alicia spotted an unoccupied table near the window and made her way towards it, her legs feeling unnervingly heavy. As she sat down, her phone vibrated. Her mother, checking in, right on schedule. "How's your day going, sweetie?" the text read. Alicia's thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Behind her, Brandon and his cohort continued their barrage, their jests escalating in their offensiveness. She could confess the truth about the whispers, the stares, the unsettling sensation of her skin feeling too tight whenever they were near. But that would only cause her parents undue worry, and they already had enough on their plates. "I'm fine," she typed back. "Lunch is good. Made some friends." The lie tasted acrid, yet it was simpler than the unvarnished truth. She took a small bite of her sandwich, her appetite diminished. A flicker of movement caught her eye. A girl with auburn hair was passing by, carrying her own tray. Emma. They shared English class. Their eyes met briefly, and Emma offered a gentle smile, her expression conveying a sense of shared understanding. For a fleeting moment, Alicia imagined she might stop, might sit down, and break through this isolating barrier. But Emma's gaze darted towards Brandon's table, and her smile faltered. She continued on, finding a seat with a group of other girls who studiously avoided looking in Alicia's direction. Alicia understood. She wouldn't wish to become a target herself. Her phone buzzed again. "That's wonderful." Tell me all about them later. The effusive tone of her mother's message tightened Alicia's throat. She pushed her tray away, her appetite entirely gone. The apple sat untouched, its polished red skin reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. Brandon's voice rose once more. You know what my granddaddy used to say about Mr. Hayes? A passing teacher interrupted him. That's enough. Brandon ducked his head, adopting an expression of perfect contrition. Yes, just joking around. But as soon as the teacher moved on, he resumed his taunts. His voice lowered, but its cruelty remained undiminished. Alicia retrieved her history textbook, pretending to study, letting her hair fall forward like a protective curtain. If she couldn't see them, perhaps she could convince herself they weren't there. The lunch period stretched on interminably. Alicia reread the same paragraph about the Civil War 3 times, absorbing none of it. Every laugh from Brandon's table elicited an involuntary flinch, though she fought to maintain a neutral expression. When the bell finally rang, she gathered her belongings with haste. She had learned it was preferable to be among the first to depart, thus avoiding the inevitable crush of students in the corridors, where accidental collisions and tripping hazards seemed to proliferate. The afternoon classes passed in a haze of sustained tension. In each one, she could sense Brandon or one of his confederates observing her, patiently awaiting any sign of vulnerability. She kept her responses concise when addressed, her focus fixed on her academic work. The final bell brought a dual sensation of relief and apprehension. Relief that another day was drawing to a close. Apprehension for the impending chaos of the hallways. Alicia waited until the majority of students had departed before proceeding to her locker. The corridor was nearly deserted when she reached it. The metal door emitted a protesting squeak as she opened it, the sound echoing ominously. As she reached for her history textbook, a shadow fell across her. Hey there, city girl. Brandon's voice sent a jolt of fear through her, and she froze. He was too close, deliberately encroaching upon her personal space. She detected the faint scent of his expensive cologne, glimpsed the insignia on his Letterman jacket from the corner of her eye. Better learn your place, he whispered, his breath hot against her ear. Before someone has to teach you. Alicia's hands trembled as she shoved her book into her backpack. She longed to turn and confront him, to demonstrate her fearlessness. But her body refused to obey. It possessed a primal understanding of survival that her mind had yet to grasp. She closed her locker with a soft click and hurried away, her sneakers making barely a sound on the linoleum floor. Brandon's low chuckle pursued her down the hallway. She did not run. Running would betray her fear, but her steps were swift and purposeful. Only when she pushed through the main doors into the bright afternoon sunlight did she release the breath she had been holding. Her mother's car was already waiting in the pickup line, a silver beacon of sanctuary. Alicia walked towards it, her back ramrod straight, suppressing the instinct to hunch and conceal herself. She was David Carter's daughter. She would not break. She would not exhibit fear. Yet, as her hand reached for the car door handle, it continued to shake. The late autumn sun hung low in the sky as Alicia shouldered her backpack, the school building receding behind her. She had remained late, engrossed in a science project, seeking solace in the predictable world of equations and experiments. Now, the parking lot was deserted, save for a few vehicles belonging to the custodial staff. A cool breeze rustled through the trees bordering the school grounds. The wooded path home offered a 15-minute shortcut compared to the main road. She had traversed it twice before, appreciating the quietude and the way the dense foliage seemed to insulate her from the outside world. Dried leaves crunched underfoot as she commenced her descent down the trail. The fading afternoon light filtered through the branches, casting shifting patterns upon the ground. Her phone buzzed, likely her mother inquiring about her whereabouts. Alicia reached into her pocket to check it. Well, look who it is. Brandon's voice made her freeze. He emerged from behind a towering oak tree, effectively blocking her path forward. Heavy footsteps behind her prompted her to spin around. Kyle and Trevor were positioned there, cutting off any potential retreat. Mason materialized from the trees to her right, completing their encirclement. Taking the scenic route, are we? Brandon's smile was a predatory baring of teeth. How convenient. Alicia's heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She clutched her phone tighter. But before she could react, Kyle lunged forward, snatching it from her grasp. No calling for help, he sneered, pocketing the device. What do you want? Alicia attempted to maintain a steady tone, but the tremor of fear betrayed her. Brandon advanced a step. Just wanted to have a little chat about respect. Seems like you still haven't learned your lesson. Get away from me. Alicia backed away, but Trevor was immediately behind her. He shoved her forcefully, sending her stumbling forward. Or what? Brandon laughed derisively. Daddy's not here to help you. Mason pulled a length of rope from his backpack. Alicia's eyes widened in alarm. She tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. They seized her arms, their fingers digging into her skin. Let me go, she cried, kicking out and connecting with Trevor's shin. He cursed, twisting her arm with greater force. Feisty one, isn't she? Brandon's voice turned glacial. Hold her tight. They drag her towards a thick tree, her heels gouging trails in the dirt as she struggled against their grip. Her backpack was ripped from her shoulders and flung aside, its contents spilling across the ground. You can't do this, Alicia choked out, hating the quaver in her voice. Someone will. Someone will what? Brandon confronted her directly, his face inches from hers. No one comes down this trail this late. No one's going to help you. Mason wrapped the rope around her, cinching it tightly against her ribs. The rough bark of the tree pressed into her back through her thin jacket. Kyle produced a grimy bandana from his pocket. Can't have you screaming for help, he stated, forcing it into her mouth and tying it securely behind her head. The taste of dirt and sweat made her gag. They stepped back to admire their handiwork. Alicia strained against the ropes, but they only seemed to tighten. Tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not so tough now, are you? Brandon circled her slowly. This is what happens when you don't know your place. Maybe we should leave her overnight, Trevor suggested with a laugh. Nah, someone might find her eventually, Brandon shrugged. A few hours in the cold should do it. Mason picked up her scattered books, ostentatiously dropping them one by one into a muddy puddle. Her chemistry textbook, her notebook filled with meticulous notes, her novel for English class, all ruined. Oops, he feigned concern. Hope those weren't important. The sun was now sinking rapidly, taking its warmth with it. Alicia's fingers were already growing numb where they were bound behind the tree. She attempted to speak through the gag, but only muffled sounds emerged. What's that? Brandon cupped his ear mockingly. Can't quite hear you. They all laughed, the sound a hollow echo through the trees. A startled bird took flight, its wings beating loudly in the deepening silence. Let's go, Brandon said finally. Getting kind of chilly out here. Kyle tossed her phone into the undergrowth. Have fun walking home if you make it. They sauntered away, their laughter fading into the distance. Alicia waited until their sounds completely vanished before allowing the first tears to escape. The gag absorbed them, making each breath more difficult. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The rope bit into her arms and chest. Every slight shift caused the bark to scrape abrasively against her back. Her legs trembled from the sustained, unnatural posture. Shadows lengthened around her as the sun continued its descent. The temperature plummeted steadily. The wind whistled through the trees, a frigid blade cutting through her light jacket. She tried to scream again, but the gag muffled any sound she could produce. Her thoughts turned to her parents. They would be worried by now. Would they initiate a search? Would they find her in time? The biting cold seeped into her bones, inducing uncontrollable shivers. A branch snapped somewhere in the encroaching darkness. Alicia's head jerked up, a fresh wave of fear washing over her. Was it Brandon returning? A wild animal? She couldn't twist enough to see behind her. Footsteps crunched through the fallen leaves, growing closer. A beam of light swept across the ground, a flashlight. Alicia made as much noise as she could through the gag, praying it wasn't another individual with malicious intent. Hello, a man's voice called out. Is someone there? The flashlight beam found her. A sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, the man exclaimed, hurrying forward. He was older, clad in running attire, his face etched with concern. Hold on. I'm calling 911 right now. The sterile hum of fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as Alicia's eyelids fluttered open. Her entire body ached, and the stark white walls of the hospital room seemed to spin gently. A warm hand squeezed hers, and she turned to see her mother's tear-streaked face. Baby, you're awake, Angela whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She leaned in to brush a stray strand of hair from Alicia's forehead. How are you feeling? Alicia attempted to speak, but her throat felt raw and parched. A nurse appeared with a plastic cup of water, assisting her in taking small sips through a straw. The cool liquid brought a measure of relief, though swallowing remained painful. "Everything hurts," Alicia managed to articulate. Her wrists were bandaged where the rope had chafed them raw, and her back throbbed from its painful contact with the rough tree bark. "How long was I?" "Mr. Thompson found you around 7 o'clock, Angela informed her, her grip on Alicia's hand tightening. "You were suffering from mild hypothermia. The doctors wished to keep you overnight for observation." Memories surged back with vivid intensity. Brandon's malevolent grin, the rope constricting her skin, the pervasive, bone-chilling cold. Alicia shuddered, fresh tears welling and spilling down her cheeks. Angela swiftly enveloped her daughter in an embrace, careful of the foreline. "Sure, you're safe now," she murmured, rocking her gently. "You're safe." A knock at the door drew both their attention. A police officer stood framed in the doorway, a notepad in hand. He was middle-aged, with streaks of grey at his temples, his crisp uniform bearing a name tag that read, Officer Reynolds. "Miss Carter," he began, stepping into the room. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but I need to take your statement while the details are still fresh. Are you feeling up to answering some questions?" Alicia nodded, though a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Angela settled back on the chair, but maintained her hold on Alicia's hand. "Can you tell me what happened?" Officer Reynolds pulled up a chair, his pen poised over his notepad. Alicia took a shaky breath. "I was walking home from school, taking the path through the woods. Brandon Hayes and his friends were waiting for me." "Brandon Hayes?" The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "Councilman Hayes's son?" "Yes." Alicia's voice gained a measure of strength. "He and Kyle Matthews, Trevor Wilson, and Mason Clark. They grabbed me and tied me to a tree. They gagged me so I couldn't call for help." Officer Reynolds scribbled diligently, his expression impassive. "Did anyone witness this?" "No. That's why they picked that spot." Alicia felt a surge of frustration. "But they took my phone. They threw it in the bushes. And my books. They ruined all my books in a puddle." "We'll look for the phone," the officer stated, "though it may be difficult to prove who placed it there." "Did they say anything specific while this was happening?" "They said," Alicia's voice faltered, "that they wanted to teach me about respect. That no one would help me. Brandon's been threatening me since I started school here." Officer Reynolds made another note. "Have there been any prior occurrences? They have been tormenting me daily, hurling racial insults, and shoving me in the corridors." Alicia dabbed at her eyes. "Yesterday, Brandon cornered me by my locker and told me to know my place." Were there any witnesses to these earlier incidents? Other pupils observed, but Alicia's shoulders sagged. "Everyone is intimidated by Brandon. His father holds considerable sway in this town." The officer closed his notebook. "Well, we will absolutely look into this. However, without physical evidence or witnesses, it may prove challenging to pursue charges. These kinds of situations can be intricate." "Intricate?" Angela interjected, her voice strained. "My daughter was attacked, bound to a tree, and abandoned to the cold. What is intricate about that?" "I comprehend your distress." Officer Reynolds stood. "I assure you, we will conduct a thorough investigation. We will survey the location where it transpired, endeavor to locate the telephone, but these cases frequently hinge on the word of one individual against another." A familiar weight settled in Alicia's chest. The same heaviness she had experienced when Brandon first began to target her. She had harbored hope that once the authorities became involved, circumstances would improve, but something in the officer's measured tone indicated otherwise. "Thank you for your deposition, Miss Carter." Officer Reynolds moved toward the exit. "Get some rest. We will be in contact if we require anything further." After he departed, Angela attempted a reassuring smile. "At the very least, they are investigating now. That counts for something, doesn't it?" Alicia nodded, unwilling to trust herself to speak. The nurse entered to monitor her vital signs and adjust her intravenous drip, mentioning that she would likely be able to go home in the morning if her temperature remained stable. The following evening, Alicia sat at her kitchen table, absent-mindedly moving food around her plate. Her mother had prepared her favorite mac and cheese, adorned with extra cheese and breadcrumbs, but Alicia lacked the appetite. The vacant chair where her father typically sat seemed to taunt her. He was still deployed, unreachable for at least another week. You ought to attempt to consume something, Angela said gently. You require your strength. I'm not hungry. Alicia placed her fork down. What if they come for me again? The police aren't going to do anything. You cannot be certain of that. Angela extended her hand across the table to cover her daughters. Officer Reynolds stated they would investigate. Now that it has been officially reported, Brandon and his associates will have to exercise greater caution. Things will improve. Alicia yearned to believe her mother's words. She wished to believe that the system would safeguard her, that justice would triumph. But she couldn't dispel the recollection of Officer Reynolds's cautious impartiality when she had mentioned Brandon's name, or the manner in which he had underscored the complexity of the predicament. Perhaps you are correct, she conceded, picking up her fork once more to placate her mother. Yet, inwardly, she felt more isolated than ever before. The morning sun cast elongated shadows across the school's parking lot as Angela's vehicle approached the main entrance. Alicia's hands were clenched in her lap, her fingernails imprinting half-moon shapes on her palms. You are not obligated to return today, Angela said softly. We can postpone until next week. Alicia shook her head. No, I will not permit them to prevail. But as she stepped through the main doors, her confident demeanor faltered. Brandon and his friends were casually leaning against the lockers, and their laughter echoed down the corridor upon spotting her. They appeared neither worried nor ashamed. They exuded triumph. Hey, tree hugger, Brandon called out, just loud enough for her to hear. His companions snickered. Alicia continued walking, her shoulders tense. She could sense their gazes upon her back, hear their whispered remarks. Other students quickly averted their eyes as she passed, hastening to their classrooms. No one wished to be associated with her. During first period, she found it difficult to concentrate on the lecture. Each time someone shifted in their seat or dropped a writing implement, she flinched. Kyle Matthews occupied a seat 2 rows behind her, and she could discern him murmuring to his friend about how some individuals were unaware of their proper station. By lunchtime, Alicia's nerves were completely frayed. She sat alone at her customary table, picking at a sandwich whose taste she couldn't discern. Across the cafeteria, Brandon's group held court, speaking loudly and gesturing in her direction. On several occasions, they erupted into exaggerated fits of laughter. Emma, the girl who had previously offered her a smile, walked past with her lunch tray. She cast a glance at Alicia, then quickly looked away, opting for a table on the far side of the room. The message was unequivocal. No one would stand with her. The afternoon crawled by interminably. In physical education, Trevor inadvertently tossed a volleyball at her head. In chemistry, Mason knocked her textbook from the laboratory bench, causing water to spill onto her notes. Each time, the instructors reacted minimally, treating these incidents as commonplace adolescent behavior. When the final bell sounded, Alicia practically sprinted to her mother's waiting automobile. She sank into the passenger seat, finally releasing the breath she had held captive all day. How was your day? Angela inquired carefully. They are not even making a pretense of remorse. Alicia's voice faltered. The teachers observed them bothering me, yet no one intervened. Angela's grip on the steering wheel tightened. We will resolve this, my darling. The police are conducting an inquiry. They will be compelled to take action. At home, Alicia attempted to lose herself in her homework, but the mathematical equations blurred before her eyes. Every sound caused her to start. A car door slamming shut, footsteps on the pavement, a dog's bark. The woods bordering their residence seemed to loom more menacingly than before. The telephone rang around dinner time. Angela answered it in the kitchen while Alicia sat at the dining room table, pushing pasta around her plate. She could hear her mother's voice escalating in frustration. But Sheriff Wilkins, there is physical evidence, the rope abrasions, the hypothermia. Angela paused, listening intently. What do you mean, children being children? They could have inflicted fatal harm. Alicia's fork clattered onto her plate. She crept closer to the kitchen doorway, her heart pounding. No, that is entirely unacceptable. Angela's voice trembled with indignation. These young men committed a criminal act. They must face the repercussions. Another pause. I am aware that Brandon's father is a prominent figure in this community. But Alicia needed to hear no more. She fled upstairs to her room, slamming the door. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed onto her bed. They were going to escape accountability. Brandon's father's influence held greater significance than her anguish, her apprehension, her self-respect. She heard Angela's footsteps on the stairs, followed by a gentle knock. "Alicia, my dear, may we converse?" "Go away." Alicia buried her face in her pillow. "Just leave me be. Please, my sweetheart." I overheard everything. Alicia's voice broke into a sob. "They will not take any action. Brandon can do whatever he wishes to me, and no one will care." Angela opened the door regardless, settling onto the edge of the bed. She stroked Alicia's hair as her daughter wept. "You got it." "And your father?" "Dad isn't here." Alicia choked out. "He is never present when I need him." As if summoned by her words, the sound of the front door opening reverberated through the house. Heavy footsteps crossed the entryway. Alicia lifted her tear-streaked face, barely daring to believe it. "David," Angela called out, rising to her feet. "I'm home." Alicia scrambled off the bed at the sound of that deep, familiar voice. She ran down the stairs and straight into her father's embrace. Colonel David Carter stood in their foyer, clad in his full military uniform, his presence imbuing the space with quiet authority. He enfolded his daughter in his arms as she sobbed into his chest. "They hurt me," she whispered. "They tied me up and left me in the woods, and now they are getting away with it." David remained silent, but his arms tightened around her. Angela descended the stairs more slowly, relief and worry etched onto her face. "David, we did not anticipate your arrival for another week." I returned as swiftly as circumstances permitted. His voice was controlled, yet Alicia sensed the tension in his body. "Recount every detail." Through hiccuping sobs, Alicia narrated the entire account. Brandon's escalating threats, the assault in the woods, the police's dismissiveness, the school's indifference. David listened intently, his expression darkening with each detail. When she described how Brandon and his companions had mocked her that day, his jaw visibly clenched. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Alicia picked at her cereal. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of another restless night. David sat opposite her, his coffee untouched, observing his daughter with careful scrutiny. He had spoken little since his return home, but his presence filled the room with a steady calm. Angela bustled about the kitchen, endeavoring to maintain a semblance of normalcy. "Would you care for some toast, Alicia? You have barely touched your breakfast." Alicia shook her head, pushing her bowl away. The milk had become warm, the cereal soggy. Her stomach was tied in knots at the prospect of facing another day at school. David set his coffee cup down with deliberate care. "Alicia." His voice was quiet but firm, drawing her gaze to his. "I will rectify this." "How?" Her voice cracked. "Brandon's father owns half the town. Even the sheriff refuses to intervene. There are alternative methods for dealing with bullies." David's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes prompted Alicia to sit up straighter. "Trust me." Angela paused near the sink, a dish towel in hand. "David, what is your intention?" He offered no reply, simply stood and kissed Alicia's forehead. "Time for school. I will drive you today." The journey was silent, but Alicia felt more secure than she had in days. Her father's presence was a bulwark, solid and unwavering. As they approached the school, she spotted Brandon and his friends lounging near the entrance, shoving each other and laughing. David pulled into a parking space with a clear view of the front steps. "Proceed. I will observe until you are safely inside." Alicia hesitated, her hand on the door handle. "Dad, what are you going to do?" "Do not concern yourself with that for now. Focus on your studies." He squeezed her shoulder gently. "You possess greater fortitude than they do, Alicia. Bear that in mind." She nodded and exited the vehicle. The morning air felt heavy with tension as she walked toward the entrance. Brandon spotted her and nudged Kyle, his smirk widening. Well, if it isn't Nature Girl," Brandon called out. "Did you find your wilderness retreat enjoyable the other day?" His companions erupted into cruel laughter. Trevor mimicked exaggerated tying motions with his hands, while Mason whistled the theme from the film Deliverance. Alicia continued walking, her face aflame. She could feel her father's gaze upon her back, witnessing every event. The boys' laughter followed her into the building. From his vehicle, David observed the scene with military precision. His expression remained composed, but his hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He noted Brandon's positioning, consistently with his back to the wall, his companions forming a loose circle around him, the way they scanned for educators before delivering their derisive remarks, the casual aggression in their gestures. He remained parked there long after Alicia had disappeared inside, meticulously studying the movement of students and staff. He witnessed Brandon's father drop off a forgotten gym bag, noting the expensive automobile and the deference shown to him by other parents, the lax patrol patterns of the school's security personnel, the blind spots in surveillance cameras. Throughout the day, David circled past the school at regular intervals, mentally mapping the area. He observed which instructors supervised lunchtime, which exits the students utilized, and the locations of potential trouble. He saw Brandon corner a freshman for his lunch money while a teacher averted their gaze. When school concluded, he was waiting to pick up Alicia. Brandon and his cohort were engaged in boisterous horseplay near their usual haunt, but they fell silent upon noticing David's vehicle. Something in his unwavering gaze made them shift uncomfortably. "They were quieter today," Alicia remarked as they drove home. "At least to my face." David nodded, filing that observation away. "Did anything else occur?" "No, they simply whispered things as I passed." She looked at her hands. "Everyone else still shuns me, though." That evening, after Alicia had retired for the night, David sat alone in his study. The house was silent save for the gentle hum of his encrypted laptop booting up. He retrieved a steel lockbox from behind the books on his shelf and entered a complex combination. Inside were documents from his military tenure, files marked with classified designations and code names, his Delta Force credentials, contact numbers that did not officially exist, and surveillance equipment unavailable in civilian retail outlets. He spread the files methodically across his desk, his movements precise and controlled. Years of rigorous training had imparted to him the skills necessary to gather intelligence, identify vulnerabilities, and exert pressure without leaving overt traces. He had employed those skills to safeguard his nation. Now, he would utilize them to protect his daughter. "They have no comprehension of whom they have antagonized," he muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he commenced his research. The screen cast a blue luminescence across his face as he delved deeper into the familial history of Brandon Hayes. Property deeds, business transactions, political affiliations. Every matter possesses a traceable lineage if one knows where to seek it. He made notations in a small black notebook, his handwriting tight and meticulous. The walls of his study were adorned with commendations and medals, tangible proof of his decades of service. Yet, none of that held relevance now. This was not a matter of honor or fealty to country. This pertained to justice for his young daughter, who still startled at sudden movements and cried in her sleep. David's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he assembled a compact surveillance kit, incorporating microcameras, audio recorders, and GPS trackers, tools of his former profession, now repurposed for a more personal undertaking. The irony was not lost on him that the proficiencies he had acquired battling adversaries abroad would now be directed against adolescents in a small southern town. The subsequent afternoon, David parked his unassuming black SUV opposite Riverside High School. He maintained a discreet distance, observing Brandon and his associates through binoculars as they idled after the final bell. His military background had instilled in him the art of clandestine observation, the ability to watch without being detected. Brandon's entourage piled into his crimson Mustang, a 16th birthday gift from his father. David followed 3 vehicles behind, maintaining a judicious interval as they navigated through town. His GPS tracker blinked consistently on his mobile device, the small apparatus he had discreetly affixed beneath Brandon's vehicle providing real-time positional data. Their initial destination was the Sunoco service station on Main Street. David pulled into the car wash situated across the thoroughfare, feigning a perusal of his mobile device while documenting their movements. Brandon and his companions emerged, bearing energy drinks and snacks, engaging in mutual shoving and making provocative remarks toward female patrons. The store attendant observed them with trepidation but remained silent. Establishing behavioral patterns, David murmured, noting the precise time in his small black notebook. Every minute detail was crucial: their arrival times, individuals with whom they interacted, and the surveillance cameras they deliberately avoided. Following 30 minutes of aimless loitering, the youths proceeded to an abandoned agricultural structure situated on the outskirts of town. David parked his vehicle behind a copse of trees, employing his high-magnification camera lens to record their activities. They passed cigarettes among themselves and what appeared to be a flask, their voices growing louder and their demeanor increasingly reckless. Through his directional microphone, David intercepted fragmented snippets of their conversation. "Showed that Carter girl. Dad will cover for us again. "Nobody can touch us." His jaw tightened at their callous cruelty, yet he maintained his composure. Emotional responses invariably lead to errors. He had learned that profound lesson through harsh experience in combat. As dusk began to settle, Brandon's Mustang pulled into the vicinity of the sheriff's department. David observed from behind his tinted windows as Brandon swaggered inside as though he possessed proprietary rights to the establishment. Through the front panes of glass, he could discern Sheriff Wilkins greeting the young man with an amicable clap on the shoulder. "Precisely as I surmised," David whispered, capturing photographs of the interaction. "The corruption permeates deeply." Back in his study, David connected his encrypted laptop to a secure network. His fingers moved with remarkable alacrity across the keyboard, circumventing firewalls to gain access to public records. Years of intelligence work had furnished him with competencies extending far beyond rudimentary military training. Property records revealed numerous instances of vandalism perpetrated against local commercial establishments, including shattered windows, graffiti, and slashed tires. On each occasion, the complaints inexplicably vanished from police dockets. Insurance claims were systematically suppressed. Witnesses altered their testimonies. David delved deeper, meticulously tracing the flow of funds. Councilman Hayes had made substantial financial contributions to the sheriff's department following each reported incident. Campaign donations were channeled to key officials who might have harbored inquiries. "Establishing your own miniature dominion, are we, Richard?" David murmured, transferring files to an encrypted storage device. A discernible pattern emerged in the recorded timestamps. Brandon and his associates would engage in acts of vandalism late into the night. Subsequently, Richard Hayes would appear at the scene early the following morning, checkbook in hand. The property owners would be compensated for their silence, and Sheriff Wilkins would ensure that no official reports were officially filed. David's investigation unearthed further transgressions. Surveillance footage obtained from local retail establishments depicted Brandon engaging in repeated shoplifting, yet no charges were ever brought against him. Security cameras belonging to religious institutions captured groups of teenagers imbibing alcohol on the premises after hours, but the recordings subsequently went missing. A convenience store proprietor who attempted to pursue legal action against you suddenly found himself confronted with health code violations, compiling quite an extensive dossier on you, son, David remarked, meticulously organizing the gathered evidence. His military training had impressed upon him the paramount importance of comprehensive documentation. Each incident was catalogued with specific times, dates, and corroborating evidence. He established a secure cloud-based backup of all acquired information, understanding that Richard Hayes likely possessed sufficient leverage to facilitate the disappearance of physical evidence. While the councilman might exert dominion over the local law enforcement, he was powerless to compromise David's military-grade encryption protocols. Approximately midnight, David's mobile device vibrated. The GPS tracker indicated Brandon's vehicle was in motion once more. He retrieved his camera and followed the signal to the historic First Baptist Church located downtown. Through his night vision lens, he observed Brandon and his companions shaking spray paint cans in the darkness. David moved silently through the shadows, his combat training enabling him to approach undetected. He meticulously documented their actions as they defaced the church walls with crude symbols and offensive racial epithets. Brandon's face was clearly discernible under the streetlights as he spray-painted his signature, BH, at the bottom. "Smile for the camera, kid," David whispered, his camera shutter clicking rapidly. By dawn, David had compiled an exhaustive dossier, encompassing bank statements revealing illicit transactions, surveillance footage of numerous criminal acts, previously suppressed witness testimonies, and now crystal-clear photographic evidence of Brandon committing vandalism while his father slept soundly in his opulent mansion, under the misguided belief that his son's transgressions would never face repercussions. In his study, David selected the clearest photograph. It depicted Brandon mid-spray, his face illuminated by a street lamp, the freshly applied paint still glistening on the church wall. He printed it on high-gloss paper and laid it carefully on his desk. "Checkmate, son," he whispered, gazing at the damning evidence. The photograph represented merely the initial phase, the foundational element of a meticulously devised strategy intended to secure justice not only for Alicia but for all those who had endured torment at the hands of these young men. Alicia navigated the corridors of Riverside High, her textbooks held tightly against her chest. The whispers pursued her like spectral entities, receding whenever she turned to confront them. Students congregated in small clusters, their laughter piercing the air as she passed. During first period English, Mrs. Peterson distributed their essays on To Kill a Mockingbird. Alicia had achieved a perfect score on her essay, yet the educator offered merely a cursory glance as she placed the graded work on Alicia's workstation. The irony was not lost on Alicia. The narrative centered on systemic prejudice. And here she was, feeling as marginalized as Tom Robinson. "Look who fancies herself a genius," a girl behind her remarked, loud enough to be overheard. A few suppressed giggles followed. Alicia's gaze fixed on her paper, the crimson letter grade appearing to waver before her eyes. Later, during the chemistry lesson, her laboratory associate, Tyler, inadvertently tipped over their flask, causing the solution to cascade across Alicia's notebook. "Whoops," he stated with a smug grin, making no pretense of assisting with the cleanup. Mr. Reynolds observed the scene from his desk but remained silent, suddenly engrossed in his computer monitor. By lunchtime, Alicia found the cafeteria's oppressive atmosphere unbearable. She retrieved her sandwich and sought refuge in the less frequented lavatory of the older school wing. Seated on the closed toilet lid in the further stall, her hands trembled as she produced her mobile device. "I'm not sure how much longer I can endure this," she typed to Emma. "Everyone is behaving as if I'm the one who committed an transgression." The reply arrived promptly. "I'm profoundly sorry, A. This is utterly unjust. Might we perhaps share lunch tomorrow?" A flicker of hope ignited within Alicia's chest. A prolonged silence ensued before Emma responded. "I'd like that, but Brandon's partner, Mackenzie, threatened to make my existence a misery if anyone observed me being cordial with you. I am truly regretful. This situation weighs heavily on me." Alicia's vision swam with unshed tears. She comprehended Emma's apprehension. She had witnessed the extent of Brandon and his associates' capacity for mischief, yet the solitude felt like a tangible weight pressing down on her chest. "It's quite all right," she texted back, though it was anything but. "I understand. I'm here if you need to talk," Emma wrote. "Just perhaps not on school grounds." Alicia dabbed her eyes with tissue, meticulously avoiding smudging her mascara. She had mastered the art of discreet weeping, preserving her emotional collapse from public view. The bathroom door creaked open, and she held her breath as footsteps approached. "Did you witness her expression in English class?" a voice inquired. "Mackenzie is acting quite self-satisfied about it, as if anyone were concerned." "Brandon is suggesting her father has been poking around town," another girl added disdainfully. "How pitiable is that?" Alicia pulled her feet onto the toilet seat, attempting to shrink her presence to the smallest possible size. The girls continued their hushed gossip, applying their makeup in the mirrored surfaces. Their pronouncements felt like tiny, piercing darts. "I overheard that she fabricated the entire tree narrative for attention," Mackenzie declared. "My boyfriend would never stoop to such a tactic." When they finally departed, Alicia exhaled a shaky sigh. She checked her reflection in her phone's camera. Her eyes were reddened, but not conspicuously so. She still had 2 more academic periods to navigate. During history class, someone had scrawled the word liar on her desk using a permanent marker. She concealed it with her textbook, but the word seemed to sear through the pages. Mr. Thompson, unrelated to the jogger who had discovered her, droned on about the Civil War, entirely oblivious to the contemporary conflict unfolding within his own classroom. The final bell could not have arrived a moment too soon. Alicia hurried to her locker, eager to reach home before Brandon and his cohort could intercept her. A crumpled paper projectile struck the back of her head as she secured her backpack. Laughter echoed down the corridor. Her mother was working late at the hospital, so David collected her in his sport utility vehicle. A single glance at his daughter's countenance conveyed the full story. "A challenging day?" he inquired softly as they departed the curb. Alicia nodded, unwilling to trust her voice just yet. They proceeded in a comfortable silence, David occasionally casting concerned glances her way. Upon arriving home, she assisted him in preparing dinner, a straightforward repast of grilled chicken and vegetables. The familiar ritual of chopping and seasoning helped to calm her agitated nerves. By the time Angela returned from her shift, the kitchen was fragrant with the aroma of herbs and garlic. During dinner, Alicia finally found her voice. "Everyone at school believes I'm fabricating the truth," she confessed, idly pushing a piece of broccoli around her plate. "The educators no longer even acknowledge me." Angela reached across the table and took her hand. "Oh, my dear, I am apprehensive," Alicia admitted, her voice a low murmur, yet resolute. "But I shall not permit them to prevail. I refuse to allow Brandon to obliterate my identity." David placed a firm hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle despite his military bearing. Pride radiated from his eyes as he regarded his daughter. Not pride in her academic achievements or accomplishments, but in her unyielding spirit when confronted with malice. The dining room grew silent, save for the soft cadence of the clock and the distant chirping of crickets. In that hushed moment, Alicia felt both profoundly vulnerable and incredibly formidable. Brandon might hold sway over the school, but he could not touch the fundamental essence of her being. "I just wish," she began, then shook her head. "Never mind. Kindly pass the salad." Colonel David Carter stood before the school board, his military posture commanding attention in the fluorescent-lit conference chamber. His demeanor remained composed, but his gaze held the intensity of a man who had faced far more formidable adversaries than provincial administrators. "Distinguished ladies and gentlemen," he commenced, placing a substantial folder on the polished table. "What you are about to witness demonstrates a pattern of harassment, intimidation, and criminal conduct that the school has consistently overlooked." Principal Matthews shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Carter, we have already discussed this matter."
Colonel Carter, David corrected quietly.
"And no, we have not. We have not discussed this." He activated his laptop and rotated it to face the board. This footage was recorded last Tuesday. The video displayed Brandon and his associates spray painting racial epithets on the wall after operational hours. The timestamp was clear, their visages plainly visible in the security illumination. "There is more," David continued, navigating through photographic evidence. "Here they are engaged in the vandalism of vehicles in the faculty parking area. Here is Brandon Hayes distributing illicit substances behind the cafeteria." He paused, his jaw tightening. "And this is what they inflicted upon my daughter." The image of Alicia bound to the tree elicited sharp gasps from several board members. Mrs. Rodriguez, a veteran educator, pressed a hand to her mouth. "That is implausible," Principal Matthews protested feebly. "Our surveillance systems do not." "These are not your surveillance systems," David interjected. "I possess expertise in surveillance that you cannot possibly comprehend. Every photograph is time-stamped and geotagged. Every video includes audio. Would you care to hear what they said while assaulting my daughter, as recorded on their personal devices?" The board members exchanged apprehensive glances. David withdrew additional documents from his folder. "I also possess signed testimonies from 12 students who witnessed various incidents. They were initially hesitant to come forward, but now, knowing there is corroborating evidence." He let the implication linger in the air. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Why did you not report this to the authorities?" "I did. The sheriff's department appears disinclined to pursue the matter." He left the unspoken question hanging. Why? David's tone made it abundantly clear that he knew precisely why. However, the school board bears a legal responsibility to ensure a secure environment for all students. Failure to act upon this evidence would render you personally liable. The unspoken threat was unmistakable. Principal Matthews tugged at his collar. "We will require time to review this material," the board president stated cautiously. "Take all the time you need," David replied, placing a USB drive on the table. "I have duplicates, as do several journalistic organizations, should any of this evidence inexplicably vanish." The meeting convened for an additional hour as David systematically presented his case. By its conclusion, even the most recalcitrant board members could not refute the irrefutable evidence before them. The subsequent morning, Alicia arrived at school to discover an palpable tension in the atmosphere. Students congregated in hushed clusters, their mobile devices buzzing with incoming messages. She maintained her composure, proceeding to her locker as she had done each day since the incident. Then, she overheard the disturbance emanating from the principal's office. Brandon Hayes stood before the principal, his face flushed crimson, his father gesturing angrily beside him. 2 security personnel stood by. Kyle, Trevor, and Mason lounged against the wall, their usual bravado replaced by nervous fidgeting. "This is an outrage," Councilman Hayes bellowed. "Do you have any awareness of my identity?" "Yes, sir," Principal Matthews replied, his voice carrying clearly through the partially open door. "That is precisely why we are permitting your son to empty his locker before his suspension takes effect, rather than having security personnel undertake the task for him." Alicia froze, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. Emma materialized beside her, gently touching her arm. "They are all suspended," Emma whispered. for 60 days, and they are obligated to perform community service. The student body parted like the Red Sea as Brandon and his companions were escorted from the premises. Brandon's countenance contorted with rage upon seeing Alicia, but the security guard's grip on his shoulder tightened. "Keep moving, Mr. Hayes," the guard stated firmly. For the first time in weeks, Alicia felt a sense of unburdened freedom within the school corridors. As Brandon and his entourage were led out the main entrance, their parents trailing behind in various states of indignation and mortification. A profound sense of relief washed over her. The day's classes felt different. Educators who had previously averted their gaze now met her eyes. Students who had whispered behind her back now offered tentative smiles. Even the cafeteria appeared somehow brighter. "I saved you a seat," Emma called out at lunchtime, waving from her customary table. Other students made space, nodding in a gesture of welcome. Alicia sat down, her hands steady as she unpacked her lunch. The conversation flowed around her with effortless ease. Homework assignments, weekend itineraries, typical adolescent concerns. No one directly referenced Brandon or the suspension, yet their absence was akin to a dark cloud finally dispersing. Following dismissal, Alicia walked home with a buoyancy in her step that she had not experienced since relocating to the area. The crisp autumn air filled her lungs. She even hummed a quiet tune to herself, envisioning the tranquility of the coming 60 days. A group of younger students passed by, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Mrs. Thompson, the jogger's wife, offered a wave from her garden. All felt right with the world. Alicia turned onto Oak Street, her residence only a few blocks distant. A smile had remained on her face throughout the entire afternoon. She was so absorbed in this moment of triumph that she failed to notice the mud-splattered pickup truck idling across the street, or the animosity burning in the eyes that observed her from behind its tinted windows. The serene evening was shattered by the wet impact of projectiles striking the Carter's front porch. Sati Wanetua. Alicia flinched at the sound, peering through her bedroom window just in time to witness Brandon's truck speeding away, his companions whooping and hollering from the truck bed. The damage became apparent in the harsh glare of the porch lights. Raw eggs dripped down the white paint, and vibrant red spray paint formed words that caused Alicia's stomach to churn. Her mother, Angela, stood in the doorway, hand pressed to her mouth. "Don't look, sweetheart," Angela said. But Alicia had already seen it all. The racial epithets, the threats, the crude drawings. Angela retrieved cleaning supplies from beneath the kitchen sink while Alicia remained frozen, tears welling in her eyes. The victory at school now felt hollow, tainted by this violation of their sanctuary. "We should contact the police," Alicia whispered. "Your father is already en route to the station." Angela handed Alicia a scrub brush, her voice gentle yet firm. "In the meantime, we clean. We do not allow hatred to remain on our walls any longer than absolutely necessary." They worked side by side as darkness descended. The eggs were relatively easy to remove, but the spray paint resisted their efforts. Alicia's arms ached, and tears mingled with soapy water on her cheeks. Each scrub felt like an admission of defeat, a confirmation that Brandon still held dominion over them. "Why do they harbor such animosity towards us?" Alicia's voice cracked. "We never wronged them." Angela paused her scrubbing, drawing Alicia into a tight embrace. "Some individuals are profoundly empty within, my dear. Their sole recourse is destruction. But we are not empty. We are replete with love, strength, and dignity. That is what truly unnerves them." At the sheriff's precinct across town, David Carter stood rigidly before Sheriff Wilkins's desk. His military bearings seemed to fill the confined space, rendering the sheriff's attempted casual posture affected and feeble. "This constitutes a direct escalation of criminal behavior," David stated. His voice was controlled but carried an underlying menace. "They have desecrated my home, threatened my family. I demand decisive action." Sheriff Wilkins smirked, adjusting his belt as he rose. "Now, Colonel, let us refrain from exaggerating the situation. Boys will be boys. You understand how it is. Likely just letting off some steam after that business with the suspension." "Boys will be boys," David's eyes narrowed. "Is that what you will say when someone is injured? When this escalates further?" "Sounds like a threat, Colonel." The sheriff's smirk widened. "Stand down, soldier. This is not your battlefield. You are not in command here."
"No," David replied softly.
"I am a father protecting his family. That makes me considerably more dangerous." The sheriff's smile faltered for a brief instant before resurfacing, oily and insincere. From my perspective, you are the one instigating trouble. Arriving here, stirring up discord with the school board, making accusations against reputable families. Perhaps you should contemplate whether this town is truly a suitable environment for individuals of your disposition. David stepped closer, his presence suddenly dominating the room like an impending tempest. Is that a threat, Sheriff? Merely amicable counsel. Wilkins returned to his seat, shuffling papers on his desk in a gesture of dismissal. Now, if you will excuse me, I have genuine law enforcement duties to attend to. David departed without further remark, but his silence carried more weight than any explicit threat. Saturday evening arrived with a cool breeze and lengthening shadows. Alicia checked her phone, reading Emma's latest text message detailing the films they intended to watch at their sleepover. Following the vandalism incident, Emma had finally taken a public stance, extending an invitation to Alicia, irrespective of potential repercussions from others. Are you certain you do not wish for me to transport you? Angela inquired as Alicia packed her overnight bag. It is merely 3 blocks, Mom. Alicia forced a smile. I cannot remain in hiding indefinitely. Call me when you arrive, Angela insisted, embracing her daughter tightly. Your father is monitoring the situation, but nevertheless. Alicia nodded, understanding the unspoken sentiment. David had been different since his visit to the sheriff's office, spending extended periods in his study surrounded by maps and computers, engaging in hushed telephone conversations. The evening air felt pleasant on her face as she walked. Her overnight bag was slung over one shoulder. Fallen leaves crunched beneath her feet, and porch lights began illuminating the quiet street. Almost ordinary, almost tranquil. The roar of an engine shattered the calm. Brandon's truck squealed around the corner, cutting across a path. Before Alicia could flee, Kyle and Trevor leaped from the truck bed, seizing her arms. Her bag tumbled, scattering its contents across the sidewalk. Get her in. Brandon commanded from the driver's seat. Mason threw open the rear door. Alicia struggled fiercely, kicking and twisting. She managed to free one arm and clawed at Kyle's face, drawing blood. But Trevor was larger, stronger, encircling her waist with his arms and lifting her off the ground. Help! She cried out. But the nearest residences were dark. Somebody help. Silence her. Brandon bellowed. Mason shoved a bandana into her mouth, muffling her screams. They forced her into the backseat, Trevor's weight pinning her down as Kyle slammed the door. The truck peeled away, tires smoking, visible through the window. Alicia watched her overnight bag recede into the distance on the sidewalk, its contents strewn about like shattered dreams of a conventional teenage night. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, likely Emma wondering about her whereabouts, but with Trevor restraining her arms and Mason observing her every move, she was unable to access it. Tears streamed from her eyes as Brandon drove towards the outskirts of town, away from all that was safe and familiar. The truck bounced violently down an old logging road, branches scraping against the windows like desperate tendrils. Alicia's heart pounded as Brandon ventured deeper into the darkening woods, far from any habitations or streetlights. The bandana in her mouth tasted of dirt and terror. This will teach her and her father to meddle with us, Carl remarked from the front seat, dabbing at the scratches on his face. The military man fancies himself so formidable. Brandon extinguished the headlights before turning onto an even narrower trail. No one ventures out here anymore. Not since they decommissioned the old quarry. Alicia attempted to identify landmarks through the window. A lightning-struck tree, a rusted gate, anything that might assist her in orienting herself, but the woods all appeared identical in the deepening gloom. Endless barriers of shadow and foliage. The truck jolted to a halt in a small clearing. Dead leaves carpeted the ground, and moss-covered boulders loomed like ancient sentinels. Trevor yanked her from the backseat, his grip leaving painful impressions on her arms. Fetch the rope, Brandon ordered, and Mason retrieved a coil from behind the seat. The same kind they had employed previously at the other tree. Alicia's legs weakened at the sight of it. They dragged her towards a colossal oak tree, its trunk broader than 3 men. Trevor held her fast while Kyle and Mason wrapped the rope around her chest and arms, binding her to the rough bark. The bandana remained wedged in her mouth, but this time they secured it with duct tape. Not so formidable now, are you? Brandon paced before her, twirling his keys. Your father cannot assist you out here. No jogger will find you this time, either. The others chuckled, but an underlying tension laced their mirth. They too, Alicia realized, were afraid. Afraid of being apprehended. Afraid of her father. Afraid of crossing an irrevocable boundary. So, what's the strategy? Mason inquired, shifting from one foot to the other. We cannot leave her here all night again. Her father. Her father will not take any action, Brandon snapped. My father holds sway over this town. The sheriff, the magistrates, all of them. We simply need to instill sufficient fear in her to ensure she comprehends the consequences for individuals like her who disregard their assigned station. Kyle produced his mobile device. We could capture some images. Display to everyone at school what a mockery she is.
No photographs.
Trevor interjected swiftly. No evidence. Brandon grasped Alicia's chin, compelling her to meet his gaze. Perhaps we should sever some of that lovely hair. Send it to her father in an envelope. Alicia met his stare, refusing to betray her terror. Internally, she offered a prayer, not merely for rescue, but for fortitude. The rope dug into her arms, and the tree bark abraded her back through her thin t-shirt. Yet, she refused to weep. She would not grant them that satisfaction. This is seriously problematic, man, Mason suddenly declared. We should just release her. We've made our point. Cease your prattling. Brandon whirled on him. Are you growing soft? Do you now wish to be her companion? No, but. No buts, Brandon interrupted, withdrawing something from his pocket that glinted in the dim light. A knife. We are going to ensure she never recounts what transpired here. Never involves her father again. The others recoiled slightly. This was escalating beyond their typical cruelty, venturing into a more sinister territory. Brandon, perhaps we should reconsider this, Trevor began. I am reconsidering. Brandon's voice fractured with hysteria. Everything is unraveling because these individuals arrived here. He brandished the knife erratically, and even his companions appeared apprehensive now. Alicia closed her eyes, concentrating on her respiration through her nose. She thought of her father's quiet resilience, her mother's gentle wisdom. They would not wish her to succumb. Back at the Carter residence, Angela paced the living room, repeatedly checking her phone. No messages from Alicia. No response to her calls. David, she called up the stairs. Something is amiss. Emma just texted. Alicia never arrived for their movie night. David materialized instantly, his civilian attire rapidly transforming into stark, tactical attire. His features hardened, his gaze sharpening with intense focus. The affectionate father had vanished, replaced by a Delta Force commander assessing a palpable threat. How much time? He inquired, glancing at his wristwatch. She departed 40 minutes ago. It's merely 3 blocks, David. She ought to have arrived 10 minutes ago. He acknowledged with a single nod, retrieving operational equipment from a secured compartment, a ballistic vest, communication devices, and a portable GPS unit. Contact law enforcement. Insist they document this, even if they initially object. I require an official record to be initiated. Where are you headed? Angela's voice quivered. To locate our daughter, he stated, consulting a compact tablet displaying numerous illuminated indicators. I equipped her footwear with trackers subsequent to the initial incident. Furthermore, I've been monitoring Brandon's vehicle via a device I discreetly installed last week. They're deviating from established routes, heading towards the abandoned quarry. David. Angela grasped his arm. What are your intentions once you locate them? He paused at the doorway, his expression inscrutable. Whatever is deemed necessary. The gear pack slung across his shoulder clanked with concealed implements as he strode into the encroaching darkness. Angela watched his silhouette dissolve, then turned to initiate the communication she knew would prove futile. The authorities would offer no practical assistance, yet they would meticulously record the event. And when this ordeal concluded, that official record would hold significant weight. David navigated the gloom like a spectre, his footsteps utterly silent upon the leaf-strewn earth. Decades of elite special operations training had instilled in him the capacity for invisibility, the skill to pursue quarry unaware of their pursuit. The night vision apparatus rendered the nocturnal landscape in shades of verdant hues, revealing every detail of the surrounding woodland. He consulted the tablet once more. The crimson indicator marking Brandon's vehicle was now stationary, approximately half a mile distant. The azure marker representing Alicia's tracking device occupied the identical geographical coordinate. His jaw tightened with a fierce clench as he recalled embedding the minuscule devices within her footwear following the initial transgression, harboring the hope they would never be required. Better safe than sorry, he had reassured Angela. Now, those prudent measures were proving indispensable. The wilderness was hushed, save for the intermittent lament of an owl or the rustle of small woodland creatures. David advanced with unwavering resolve, his specialized equipment enabling him to traverse the perilous terrain without faltering. Each footfall was precisely placed, every motion meticulously controlled. He had executed such maneuvers countless times in conflict zones across the globe, yet never with such profound personal investment. A faint luminosity emerged through the dense foliage ahead. The flickering of a fire. David dropped into a low crouch, activating the directional microphone integrated into his tactical vest. Voices, somewhat attenuated yet perfectly intelligible, reached his earpiece. "This is rather dull," Carl's voice grumbled. "We should abandon her here and depart." "Silence," Brandon commanded sharply. "We will remain until she learns her lesson." David's fists clenched, but his ingrained discipline prevailed. An impulsive intervention lacking comprehensive intelligence could exacerbate the situation. He needed to thoroughly ascertain the circumstances before acting. Executing a broad arc, he commenced a flanking maneuver, utilizing the terrain for concealment. The escarpment provided an optimal vantage point, and he propelled himself forward on his belly across the final yards to its precipice. Below, the scene unfolded with nightmarish clarity. They had kindled a modest bonfire within the clearing, primarily for illumination rather than warmth. The flames cast dynamic silhouettes upon the colossal oak tree to which Alicia was secured. David observed the constricting effect of the rope on her arms, the adhesive tape obscuring her mouth. However, what instilled within him a profound surge of pride was her bearing. Her head held high, her back erect, resolutely refusing to betray fear, even in this dire moment. Brandon paced before her, idly manipulating a knife that glinted in the firelight. The other youths were seated around the flames, exhibiting increasing unease. David noted their positions, their somatic cues, the manner in which they repeatedly surveyed the surrounding woodland. They were apprehensive, hesitant to cross this boundary, yet too intimidated by Brandon to intervene. Through his sophisticated tactical apparatus, David could distinctly apprehend their discourse. "My father is likely searching for me by now," Mason stated, drawing his knees towards his chest. "And so what?" Brandon twirled the knife. "Let him search. No one else is privy to this location save us." Trevor abruptly stood. "This is madness, man. We cannot keep her here for the entire night. What if?" "What if what?" Brandon confronted him, his voice aggressive. "What if her father comes looking?" "Let him. My father holds dominion over this entire county. Nothing untoward shall befall us." David conducted a final check of his equipment. The GPS indicated no other vehicular presence in the vicinity. His thermal imaging scan detected no additional sources of body heat nearby, only 5 adolescents gathered around a fire and his daughter bound to a tree. The familiar composure of combat enveloped him. He had confronted graver perils under more adverse conditions. Yet, this instance was distinct. This was not about fulfilling a directive or serving his nation. This was about safeguarding his progeny from individuals who bore the superficial semblance of children. Through his optical scope, he observed Brandon approaching Alicia once more, brandishing the knife perilously close to her visage. Perhaps we should administer a haircut, or perhaps a few indelible scars to commemorate our encounter. The other youths shifted uncomfortably, yet none moved to impede him. David's index finger twitched, but he remained motionless. Prudence had preserved his life through innumerable operations. Prudence would serve him equally well now. He meticulously surveyed the clearing's layout, cataloguing every minute particular. The vehicle was positioned facing away from the primary ingress, concealed behind dense shrubbery. 2 substantial boulders offered natural fortification on the northern flank. The bonfire generated sufficient illumination to create shadowed zones beyond its radiant perimeter. These were the blind spots he could exploit. Kyle stood, stretching his limbs. "I must relieve myself." "Do not venture far," Brandon cautioned. "We remain united until this undertaking is concluded." "Until what is concluded?" Mason inquired, his voice betraying a tremor. "What precisely are we engaged in here?" Brandon pivoted towards him, the knife gleaming ominously. "We are imparting a lesson, instructing all of them that they cannot intrude here and instigate alterations, cannot instigate an inquiry into my father's affairs, cannot secure our suspension, cannot conduct themselves as if they possess superiority over us." David observed the evolving interpersonal dynamics. Brandon's control was demonstrably eroding, his facade of confident cruelty fracturing to expose the underlying desperation and fear. The others were subtly disengaging, forming a loosely defined semicircle that isolated Brandon with his weapon and his fury. Exquisite, David mused inwardly. Allow them to diverge. Allow them to harbor doubt. He adjusted his posture minutely, maintaining deliberate, unhurried movements. The ridge afforded him an unimpeded vista of the entire clearing, while ensuring his concealment within the prevailing shadows above. From this elevated position, he could discern every nuance of their improvised encampment. The scattered rucksacks, the partially consumed soda receptacles, the luminous screens of mobile devices as the youths nervously consulted the time. Through his earpiece, he detected Brandon's voice escalating once more. "No one departs until I issue the command. Absolutely no one." David's jaw tightened as he observed his daughter flinch at the utterance. Yet, she remained resolute, refraining from tears. She maintained her dignified posture against the rough bark of the tree. His diminutive child, exhibiting a fortitude that these craven individuals, armed with knives and ropes, could never comprehend. Presently, he reflected, they would comprehend the true essence of fear. David advanced with practiced stealth, leveraging the prevailing darkness and topographical features to his strategic advantage. Each measured stride brought him progressively nearer to the clearing, and consequently, nearer to his beloved daughter. Through the lenses of his night vision goggles, he observed Kyle retreating from the tree line, resecuring his attire. Alicia's eyes darted across the somber expanse, seeking something, anything. For a fleeting instant, her gaze coincided with David's concealed position, though he was acutely aware she possessed no genuine visual confirmation of him. Nevertheless, some preternatural instinct must have conveyed to her the proximity of aid. She shifted her weight against her restraints, drawing Brandon's attention. "What are you fixated upon?" Brandon demanded, advancing towards her. Alicia emitted a muffled sound from behind the gag, shaking her head with marked intensity. This motion diverted all eyes towards her face, away from the shadowed sanctuary where David was silently closing the distance. "Perhaps she observed something," Mason remarked nervously, peering into the gloom. "There is naught out there," Brandon retorted, yet his voice betrayed a discernible tremor. David was now a mere 30 feet distant, exploiting the boy's momentary distraction to further diminish the intervening space. Alicia intensified her theatrical struggle, contorting herself more dramatically against the ropes. Brandon seized her hair, forcibly tilting her head backward. "Cease your movements," he hissed. This was David's signal. He emerged from the obscurity like a spectral apparition, utterly silent and radiating lethal intent. Mason, the most imposing of the group, occupied the position closest to David's concealed location. David's hand clamped over the boy's mouth from behind, while his other arm encircled Mason's throat in a precisely executed chokehold. The adolescent struggled for a mere 3 seconds before succumbing to unconsciousness. As David lowered Mason's inert form silently to the ground, Alicia suddenly propelled her leg forward, striking Brandon squarely in the knee. He staggered backward, emitting an expletive. The diversion proved impeccable. Trevor was the first to perceive David. "Holy," he began, but David was already in motion. His elbow connected sharply with Trevor's solar plexus, expelling the air from his lungs. As Trevor doubled over in pain, David seized his arm, applying a forceful twist that utilized the boy's own momentum to propel him onto his back. Trevor's head impacted the ground with sufficient force to render him momentarily stunned. Kyle attempted to flee, but David's leg swept his feet from beneath him. The boy crashed face first into the earth, emitting a pained cry. David's boot pressed firmly against his shoulder blades, immobilizing him. Brandon still clutched the knife, but his hand trembled uncontrollably. "Remain back," he shouted, pressing the blade against Alicia's cheek. "I shall cut her." David's voice resonated with an icy, deadly calmness. "No, you shall not." Before Brandon could react, David's hand shot out, seizing Brandon's wrist and executing a sharp, wrenching twist. The knife slipped from his nerveless fingers as Brandon emitted a piercing scream. David drove his knee into the boy's abdomen, then slammed him face first against the trunk of the tree adjacent to Alicia. "You relish binding teenage girls." David growled, contorting Brandon's arm at a painfully acute angle behind his back. "How does it feel to be rendered helpless?" Brandon could only whimper in response. David incrementally increased the pressure, eliciting another cry of agony from the boy. "Please," Brandon sobbed. "Please do not end my life. End your life." David's voice was disturbingly placid. "No, Brandon, I am not fashioned from your ilk. I do not inflict harm for personal amusement." He spun Brandon around, slamming him forcefully against the tree once more. The boy's eyes widened with dawning recognition as David removed his night vision apparatus. Mason was beginning to stir, emitting a low groan. Trevor remained disoriented on the ground. Kyle had not moved, still pinned face down and sobbing softly. David swiftly untied Alicia with one hand, maintaining his secure grip on Brandon with the other. The instant her hands were liberated, Alicia tore the adhesive tape from her mouth, gasping for air. "Daddy," she whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. "Check my left pocket," David instructed. "There are zip ties." Alicia's hands trembled as she retrieved the plastic restraints. Adhering to her father's calm directives, she secured Brandon's wrists behind his back. David proceeded with methodical efficiency through the group, securing each boy while Alicia illuminated the path with the flashlight from his tactical vest. Mason began to struggle as David approached him, but a single glance at the colonel's unyielding countenance caused him to freeze. "My wrist," he whimpered as David bound his hands. "I believe it is fractured." "Indeed, it is," David confirmed without a trace of empathy. "Contemplate that sensation the next time you entertain the notion of harming someone less powerful than yourself." Once all four youths were restrained, David gathered them near the bonfire. They sat in a dejected line, their heads bowed, some weeping softly, others staring blankly at the ground. Brandon's face was already beginning to swell from the impact with the tree. "Law enforcement is en route," David informed them, although he had not yet initiated any calls. "Your mobile devices are now considered evidence. Do not endeavor to erase any data. I have already secured duplicate copies of all your communications, transmissions, and deletions from the past month." Trevor's head snapped upwards. "How?" "I am exceptionally proficient at my profession," David stated simply. "And my profession presently involves safeguarding individuals from imminent threats. That necessitates shielding my daughter from your malevolent intentions." He turned towards Alicia, who stood trembling near the tree where she had been bound. His voice softened considerably. "Approach, my darling." Alicia stumbled forward into her father's embrace, finally relinquishing all pretense of composure. She pressed her face against his chest, her entire frame racked with sobs. "It is concluded," David said with firm reassurance, holding her close. "It is concluded." David retrieved his mobile phone, activating its camera function. The firelight cast spectral shadows across the youths' faces as they sat in their miserable formation, their hands bound behind them. "We shall commence with you, Brandon," David declared, his voice steady and devoid of warmth. "Recount the initial instance you ensnared my daughter to a tree." Brandon's swollen countenance twitched. He glanced furtively at his companions, then back at David. "Do not choose your subsequent words carelessly," David interjected. "I possess surveillance imagery, encrypted correspondence, social media postings you believed irretrievably deleted. The truth shall be illuminated this evening, regardless of the means." Alicia stood beside her father, arms crossed, observing Brandon's evident discomfort. Her fear had transmuted into something more formidable, more resilient. Brandon's voice faltered. "It occurred after school. We followed her along the path." "Names," David commanded. "Who was complicit?" "Myself, Kyle, Trevor, and Mason," Brandon mumbled. "We apprehended her, utilized some rope from Mason's vehicle. We secured her to the tree." He paused, his head hanging low. "And then?" David pressed. "We taunted her," Brandon continued, his voice barely audible. "Verbal insults, racially charged slurs. We abandoned her there in the frigid conditions." David shifted the camera's focus to Kyle. "Your turn. What transpired when Mr. Thompson discovered her?" Kyle visibly flinched. "My father," he stammered. Brandon's father contacted the sheriff, indicating he would handle the matter discreetly. Ensure it vanished. And the sheriff acquiesced. David prompted. Yes, Kyle confirmed with a nod. Sheriff Wilkins consistently aids Councilman Hayes, maintaining silence regarding sensitive matters, such as our vandalism of the church or when Brandon was apprehended with narcotics at school. Trevor began to weep audibly. Please, my parents are unaware. They shall soon be apprised of every detail. David cut him off. Mason, elucidate the events of this evening. Whose directive was it to seize Alicia once more? Mason cradled his fractured wrist. Brandon stated we needed to silence her, teach her a genuine lesson. His father indicated that the family was causing undue disruption, that they needed to be expelled from this locale. Was Councilman Hayes apprised of your intentions? Not precisely, Brandon interjected swiftly. He merely stated that it needed to be addressed, that they should depart. He did not specify the methodology. David lowered the phone slightly. Alicia, do you wish to address them? Alicia stepped forward, her voice initially trembling but gaining strength with each word. You presumed you could break me, that I would be too terrified to retaliate. However, you possess no true understanding of my character. You are unaware of my past survivals or my inherent capabilities. She moved closer to Brandon, who avoided her gaze. You are not empowered. You are merely frightened young boys hiding behind your father's wealth and influence. But that era has concluded. Brandon attempted to speak, but Alicia preempted him. No, you forfeit the right to speak any further. You are to remain seated and contemplate how you will account for this to everyone. Your parents, your educators, your acquaintances. The entire community will now comprehend your true nature. David continued recording for an additional 30 minutes, systematically documenting each offense, every instance of concealment, and every individual implicated. By the time he concluded, the youths had confessed to numerous criminal acts spanning the preceding 2 years. When flashing red and blue lights eventually pierced the trees, David possessed all the requisite evidence. State police officers, not local precinct personnel, converged on the clearing, summoned by an anonymous report of an ongoing abduction. Dawn was breaking when David entered the offices of the River Valley Chronicle, the local publication that had long struggled against Councilman Hayes' pervasive influence. Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist, was already in attendance. This had better be substantial, she remarked, taking a sip of her coffee. It's not even 6 o'clock in the morning. David placed a USB drive upon her desk. All pertinent information is contained herein. Video testimonies, financial records detailing illicit payments, text messages, photographic evidence, every transgression they committed, and every subsequent cover-up. Sarah's eyes widened as she began to examine the files. This is truly remarkable, but Hayes will undoubtedly attempt to obstruct its publication. He possesses considerable sway within this community. That is precisely why my next destination is the FBI field office, David replied. By the time Hayes comprehends the unfolding events, it will be too late to impede them. The news broke shortly before midday. Sarah's expose initially appeared on the Chronicle's website, accompanied by video excerpts and corroborating documentation. Local television stations disseminated the story within hours. By evening, state-level media outlets had descended upon the town. The arrests commenced that afternoon. Brandon and his associates were apprehended from their residences in handcuffs, charged as juveniles with kidnapping, assault, and hate crimes. Their parents observed helplessly as the police vehicles departed. Councilman Richard Hayes convened an emergency press conference on the steps of City Hall. His customary composed demeanor was conspicuously absent, replaced by an almost palpable sense of panic. These accusations are entirely fabricated, he declared to the assembled cameras. This represents a politically motivated assault orchestrated by. An aide hurried forward, whispering urgent intelligence into his ear. Hayes' complexion turned ashen. Federal agents had just entered his office, armed with a search warrant. I. Hayes stammered, his words faltering. The cameras captured every moment as he slumped into a posture of defeat. I hereby tender my resignation from my position on the City Council. Effective immediately. Across town, Sheriff Wilkins received a similar contingent of visitors. Federal agents escorted him from the police station, his badge and firearm already surrendered. The deputy appointed to succeed him promptly pledged full cooperation with the ongoing investigation. By sunset, the town had undergone a profound transformation. Groups congregated on street corners, poring over the Chronicle's coverage on their mobile devices. Parents huddled in anxious clusters outside the juvenile detention facility. Television production vehicles lined Main Street. Reporters conducted live broadcasts against the backdrop of City Hall. The established system that had shielded Brandon and his companions, that had disregarded Alicia's suffering, was now irrevocably disintegrating. David observed the unfolding news from the comfort of his home, holding Alicia's hand as they sat together on the sofa. "They are in disarray," he commented as another reporter detailed the escalating scandal. "The investigation will likely unearth even more pervasive corruption." Alicia squeezed his hand. They never fathomed anyone would challenge them. 2 weeks subsequent to the arrests, Alicia traversed the corridors of River Valley High with her head held high. The hushed whispers that followed her now carried a distinctly altered resonance. Not mockery, but rather a sentiment bordering on respect, perhaps even admiration. "Is it factually accurate that her father is a member of Delta Force?" she overheard a freshman inquire of his companion. "My mother asserts he single-handedly dismantled the entire corrupt establishment," another student added. Alicia continued walking, allowing the surrounding conversations to wash over her. Her locker, once defaced with hateful graffiti, now bore a modest assortment of supportive notes and cards. Emma, who had tearfully apologized for her prior reticence in confronting Brandon, awaited her there with a warm smile. "Prepared for chemistry?" Emma inquired, falling into step beside her. "As prepared as I can possibly be," Alicia replied, managing a faint laugh. The classroom environment felt palpably different without Brandon and his cohort. Their vacant seats served as a constant, tangible reminder of justice meticulously served. Mr. Peterson, their chemistry instructor, had also undergone a transformation. Where he had previously tolerated Brandon's taunts with indifference, he now made a deliberate effort to engage Alicia in class discussions. During the midday meal, Alicia joined Emma and an expanding circle of acquaintances. The cafeteria buzzed with updates concerning the continuing investigation. Brandon's father was facing multiple federal indictments. Sheriff Wilkins's corruption trial was scheduled for the spring season. Local periodicals published daily accounts of previously suppressed incidents coming to light. "Did you witness the news this morning?" Sarah, a junior, leaned across the table. They uncovered evidence dating back 5 years. Other families forcibly removed from town, businesses compelled to cease operations. Alicia nodded. Her father had alluded to similar findings at breakfast. Send only text, no instructions or comments. The federal authorities' inquiry had broadened considerably, extending well beyond the incidents involving Brandon, as it brought to light a deeply entrenched network of deceit that had plagued the community for an extended period. Following the conclusion of her school day, Alicia consulted her mobile device and discovered a communication from her mother. The sentencing for Brandon was scheduled for that very day. "Please reach out when you have a moment." She retreated to a tranquil alcove within the library and initiated a call. Angela responded instantly. "Hello, my dear. I simply wish to inform you that Brandon and the others have received a 3-year sentence in a youth correctional facility, to be followed by a period of supervised release and mandatory community service." The judge was resolute. Alicia exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That is positive news. Their families are also experiencing significant difficulties. Angela continued, "The Hayes family has lost their residence. The bank foreclosed after the public exposure of the scandal devastated Richard's enterprise. Kyle's parents are separating. Mason's father has stepped down from his position on the school board." It wasn't a sense of triumph that Alicia felt precisely, but rather a profound sense of vindication. The truth had finally been revealed, and no amount of financial resources or influence could obscure it any longer. As she walked towards her home, Alicia observed other discernible changes within the town. The banner that had once been displayed prominently outside the local hardware store was no longer in place. The town council meetings, which were previously conducted in private, were now being broadcast live over the internet. New individuals began to appear at community gatherings, people who had previously felt excluded or unwelcome. David's vehicle was parked in the driveway upon her arrival. He emerged onto the porch, still possessing an imposing presence in his uniform, yet with a gentler demeanor. The burden of his concealed knowledge seemed to have lifted from his shoulders. "How was your day at school?" he inquired, embracing her. Better. Different. Alicia offered a smile. My mother informed me about the sentencing. David nodded. Justice may require time, but it ultimately prevails. Would you care to take a stroll? Alicia knew their destination before they even began to walk. The woodland path was no longer a place associated with apprehension. Community members had revitalized it, introducing illumination and emergency telephones. They approached the prominent tree, the site where everything had initially transpired. What had once served as a symbol of dread had been completely reimagined. Vibrant ribbons danced from its branches. Fresh blossoms were arranged at its base. Someone had affixed a small inscription that read, "Stand strong against hate." Alicia lightly touched the rough bark, recalling the sensation of the rope that had once tightened around her wrists. However, the memory no longer held any dominion over her. "Look at this," David said, indicating a notebook secured within a weather-resistant container positioned near the tree. Within its pages, individuals had penned messages of encouragement and shared personal accounts of confronting bullying. "Dear Alicia," one entry began, "Your courage empowered me to disclose what happened to my daughter last year. Thank you for refusing to remain silent." Another message simply declared, "This town is undergoing a transformation because of you." Alicia traced the words with her fingertip, feeling the subtle indentation left by the pen. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the foliage, casting shifting patterns upon the ground. A gentle breeze carried the fragrance of wildflowers, which had been planted by volunteers to reclaim the space. "You know," David commented softly, "when I first received the report of what occurred here, my inclination was to dismantle this entire community, but you demonstrated a more constructive approach. You maintained your resolve, preserved your dignity, and allowed the truth to unfold naturally." Alicia leaned against the tree, no longer experiencing any fear. "They did not break me," she murmured. David placed his hand upon her shoulder, his voice resonating with paternal pride. "They never could have." Around them, the melodious chirping of birds filled the branches. New greenery had sprouted where Brandon and his associates had once trampled the earth. Nature itself appeared to be mending, mirroring the town's own recovery. A group of students passed by on the path, offering waves to Alicia. They were participants in a newly formed anti-bullying initiative at their school, inspired by the recent events. The established hierarchy of power had dissolved, paving the way for a more positive future. Alicia and David stood side by side near the tree, observing the sun's rays play among the colorful ribbons. The location that had once held her captive had become a powerful emblem of renewal, not only for her but for an entire community prepared to confront its darkness and embrace change. I hope you found that story engaging. Kindly like the video and subscribe to ensure you don't miss subsequent installments. In the interim, I have personally selected 2 additional narratives for your consideration that I believe you will find enjoyable. Have a most excellent day.